Good evening, Ghana. This is Ben Mengazi. Paul Adom Otchere has been arrested and detained by the OSP. Abshan, mun we see time. Mr. House, when you subscribe to this channel. I feel the turn on notification bell on. Sabaya, your latest update. Ubanye bi ehwe and feel free to but my chira juice wo comment share and share video no ma frosin enye bi enhwe. Anura ya na won say Paul Adom Otchere has been arrested and detained by the OSP. Up to now, on your meet bail conditions. Abusia, the lawyer Akasa. Yentie the lawyer.
Where is the whereabouts of your clients at the moment?
A very good evening to you and your viewers this evening. As I speak to you, I'm unable to say for a fact where our client is, except to mention that he's been moved from the office of the special prosecutor. We are getting conflicting reports as to his location. We've been to the National Security Head Office and we've been informed he's not there. And so we are still making frantic efforts to locate specifically where he's been taken to.
Right. The OSP has released a statement saying that your client was not able to meet his bail conditions. What is the difficulty here?
Now, first of all, the statement by the OSP and all honesty is out of place. The challenge that the OSP has set is essentially to give the dog a bad name so that you can hang it. Because it is unreasonable in the context of bail to require an accused person to produce properties in his own name. What the OSP is essentially saying is that persons who lack properties or poor people in this country cannot own or cannot make bail in this country. The shocking fact is that while taking the profile of the suspect indicated that he does not own any landed property. And so for the OSP to set 2 landed properties in his name as precedent for his bail condition is essentially concluding to hang him and detain him. And so we find the bail conditions very unreasonable. It is akin the person to buy bail, and we think that it is completely out of place for any reasonable law enforcement agency to require such bail conditions.
But are you working to meet the conditions, or are you throwing your hands up in despair?
As lawyers, we are going to deploy every legal means necessary and every legal means ethical to meet any conditions that the law sets. But as you are all aware, where those conditions are also unreasonable, there are options available to us, and we intend to pursue it to the fullest. I must point out, yes.
Go ahead.
I must point out that as far as these bail conditions are concerned, except the office of the special prosecutor is asking our clients to find money to go and buy 2 landed properties so he can secure his bail, it is completely out of place because the suspect says, I do not own a landed property. So that condition for now cannot be met. It is unreasonable.
But what other options are available to you to ensure that you secure his release?
I mean, we are still discussing our options, but the bottom line remains that in the hierarchy of affairs, the OSP ranks lower to our courts. And the courts always have the power to relook at conditions that are set by such bodies. But the fundamental point remains that these conditions that have been set by the OSP is calculated to detain Paul Adom Otchere and nothing else. It is solely calculated to detain him, even whether for a night or 2 and nothing else. The conditions can, because you see, the point is that usually when law enforcement require bail, they don't even want properties of the suspect, so that in case the suspect runs away, the person who has 2 surety would forfeit his properties and can't produce the suspect. It is out of the ordinary that law enforcement requires that the suspect should provide landed properties in his own name. In situations where you ordinarily even provide, the courts would often reject it, asking that somebody has to come and bail you. And so we find what the OSP has done completely out of place, out of line, unprecedented, and no well-meaning Ghanaians should endorse this, especially for journalists, because this is setting the tone for getting people to keep quiet when their issues in respect of their operations come up for interrogation.
Right. Counsel, where Paul Adom Otchere stays currently, is it not his own house? Can he not use that as one of the landed properties?
He has indicated, like I said, in his suspect profile, that he does own a landed property. That property belongs to his mother, properly so called. And that is why it is. And so it cannot be, like I've stated, to require him to own landed property. That, as I sit here, I don't own landed property. So if I come into conflict with the law, I can't have bail. If the average person on the streets come into conflict with the law, he has to own landed property to be able to make bail. Mind you, the purpose of bail is to secure the attendance of the suspect and not as punishment. And so they must be reasonable. And especially in the case of somebody like Paul Adom Otchere, who is a public person, who is well known, it will not even be out of place to grant the person a self-recognizance bill. Not to talk less, such unreasonable and unconscionable conditions, as the Office of the Special Prosecutor has said. We think that this is setting back our democratic values and clock by far many miles. And we should be ready to speak against it on any day.
Will you be heading to court for a bail variation?
As I said, we are still discussing our options. And in the coming days, you see what steps would be taken towards realizing our client's freedom as it properly should be.
Ahead of the meeting with the OSP, we saw a letter written by your chambers to the OSP. What were your initial concerns?
The initial concern was that, again, the OSP's letter came at a time when most of us were unavailable too. And so, as has been the practice with law enforcement, and this is not the first time, if for any reason they are unable to realize counsel's presence, we would usually engage with them and then the meeting will be rescheduled. But again, as if it is some premeditated and some pre-scheduled scheme at all points and in all intent to get Paul Adom Otchere detained, that letter went in a matter of 2 hours. The OSP had responded. In fact, we saw the response in the media even before it actually reached us. And for us, that speaks to a certain pre-calculated attempt there and skew these facts to detain Paul Adom Otchere. We don't think that the OSP is acting in good faith, and we think that moving forward, all well-meaning Ghanaians, again, should speak against this, because we cannot have law enforcement use its powers in the oppressive manners that the OSP is exerting the powers that they want.
Right. What are the specific allegations against your client, and has he been formally charged?
In fact, that is the other inconsistency in the statement that the OSP released. The OSP purports to have charged our client, and yet again they say that they are investigating possible procurement breaches. The suggestion being that they themselves are inconclusive regarding the findings that they have or what charges they are proceeding. Now, even more surprising is the fact that they claim the contract was awarded to a body other than what the board approved, meaning that the board did approve a body. But even more strange, the managing director who signed those contracts is working, and yet the board, who as it were sits at a higher level and only provide policy direction and approval, being imposed with outrageous and unconscionable bail conditions in the hope that they will be detained if they fail to meet it. We think that the OSP's approach to these issues does not bode well for our gains when it comes to criminal jurisprudence, and we should all be willing to deal with it.
Counsel, what explanations has your client given for the allegations leveled against him?
I would for now not want to go into those merits, but for those of you who have access to TV, Paul Adom Otchere himself this morning laid out the facts as relates to the issues before the OSP on Metro TV this morning. And that is just what he stuck with and what he has told the OSP as far as his knowledge and the matters that are in discussion are concerned. Nothing beyond that. And so whatever he said this morning in relation to the board approving based on recommendations that were made and based on assessments and non-financial commitment by GACL remains what the record reflects as being the position of the board on this.
Do you think he's being victimized?
I think so, because we all know, in fact, that Paul Adom Otchere has been one of the vocal critics of the special prosecutor. And throughout the time of his criticism, he has consistently maintained of schemes and attempts to more or less silence and punish him. And it is why I say that journalists particularly must be up and speaking, because today it is Paul Adom Otchere. Tomorrow it might be somebody else. Nowhere in the jurisprudence of this country has it been said that a person must own landed property to be able to make bail. And even when they were asked to vary the bail conditions because the suspect had stated he owned no landed property, they blatantly refused and insisted that if he does not own landed property and therefore cannot produce properties in his name, he was going to be detained until he has met it. Clearly, he's been victimized with the sole purpose of detaining him with the hope that he would keep quiet in respect of matters of the OSP. But we know our client is a man of conviction. And regardless of what happens, what he believes to be right, he would insist and speak against no matter what happens with the OSP.
All right, lawyer, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Absha, when the information and the lawyer about the client arrest, that's Paul Adom Otchere, arrest one sense some OSP near my way was so you see, and no question so you see. I was your teen, same nibi. Absha, Mr. Rawa, charge mammy or comments. Peace out.